I am Captain Spawn, and this is day 345 of Spawn Year. Intellectually stimulating. That's my review of this miniseries, and man did I need it. 45 gallons of life-renewing Mountain Dew wouldn't make me feel as positively refreshed as I feel right now. This final installment was satisfying, surprising, ripping, and most importantly, resolved a wonderfully coherent story, leaving no loose ends or anything to scratch my head about. As for the series on the whole, I dare say I liked this more than anything Bendis wrote. And that's really saying something, because that first story especially was an excellent supernatural, gritty crime thriller. Yes, I'm certainly a sucker for good stories that explore the art of narrative through a narrative. Both of my favorite Deep Space Nine episodes do this, The Visitor and Far Beyond the Stars. But it isn't just that it personally resonates with me. Some of the themes and metaphors are perhaps too explicitly defined through dialogue exchanges at the end, but I do think it's a layered piece that can be enjoyed on multiple levels. There's the character drama between Sam and Garland, admittedly the weakest, but it becomes less typical as the story progresses and Garland is a fully drawn, believable person who I come to relate to and care about so much that when Sam thinks he's found her dead, I actually froze and found it difficult to continue. I breathed a sigh of relief when it turns out to be the other redhead in the story, Allie. Not that you deserve to die, Allie, but your whole speech about how nobody's innocent and the writer should be protected because he's doing God's work might have been a tad prophetic. Then there's the idea layer, driven primarily by the fundamental differences in Sam and Garland's worldviews. What's more important, why a person does terrible things or how to stop it? While I do still think Sam's viewpoint is grossly oversimplified, surely you have to get into a killer's mind to some degree in order to figure out his motives and behavioral patterns. I like that the story never comes down on one priority over the other. Through their leads with the drug connection, Sam and Twitch do manage to discover who the killer or the first victim is independently of Garland, by following a physical trail as opposed to a psychological one. But it's Garland who actually finds the writer, and this leads to the classic whodunit layer. I was way off the mark and never would have called this, but there are plenty of clues foreshadowing it throughout, like the note on the body last issue claiming the writing isn't about a deep-seated desire to get caught, and all the things the writer wrote on before people started dying. I'm glad that paid off. It turns out the first victim wasn't killed by the writer at all, but in fact by Jacob Marley, who will now spend the rest of his life behind bars and insisting to his cellmate that he's real and not the result of a fragment of an underdone potato. Marley merely provided the morbid canvas for the writer to take his desperate need to get the story out to the next level, and apparently already mentally unstable, a little convenient, but there's no serial killer scenario without it, he develops a stomach for killing, goes after the editor's girlfriend, and gets careless, creating a chain of events that necessitates disposing of several loose ends. It's neat that in exploring these two worldviews, Blangio and Airbetta create a scenario in which there are actually two invariably linked cases, so that Sam and Garland are dealing with different problems both figuratively and literally. She's looking for the writer and he's looking for the killer, and it turns out they both would have stumbled on the same facts either way. Importantly, however, Garland's approach, getting into the writer's mind, is more reckless and dangerous, as she's the one who gets kidnapped and nearly killed in the process. And it's, again, a little convenient that the writer leaves her alive after explaining his whole scheme when he's killed everyone else. And that's mostly because the snowfall motif, the question of whether fate determines where snowflakes fall or if it's simply random, can't be paid off without it. Her kidnapping, while a little damsel in distressy, leads more credence to Sam's philosophy that an unhealthy fascination with the mind of a psychopath is dangerous. I really like his last word on the subject. that no matter why a storm is happening, it doesn't change the priority of getting someplace safe until it passes. The reason Garland couldn't get a proper read on the writer through his writing turns out to be because, while the handwriting is his, the words aren't. She gets a break when the editor's girlfriend calls, who managed to save a couple pages of the manuscript he tried to burn. From that, Garland deduces that the original story was written by a woman. Lucky she just happened to be unprofessional enough to submit it in her own handwriting. It turns out she was the writer's sister, whose only ambition was to become an author, and who was tragically killed before she could fulfill her dream. So the writer, not an actual writer at all, has made it his sole purpose to get her novel in the public eye any way he can. Ever thought of chalk on a sidewalk, or shipping everyone in the phone book a chapter on a t-shirt, or public access television, or skywriting? Now that would be a memorable criminal caper, a novel written in the sky via air missile. This revelation makes Allie's line last issue more disturbing, at least by my interpretation. If she's saying nobody's innocent because everyone's inherently selfish to some degree, this guy is a direct challenge to that notion, because he's far from innocent and commits atrocities in the name of preserving the memory of his sister. I like that there's more to this than a disgruntled writer who couldn't get published, and that although misguided and mentally unstable, I can find some sympathy for this killer. On the negative side, there are some plot conveniences, as I've mentioned, to force certain pieces of the story to come together. It does resort to the female lead getting kidnapped, and her getting found by the writer in the first place seemed easy, unless he was following the editor's girlfriend, but we aren't told that. And Twitch is really just along for the ride this time. He's a competent investigator and gets his token moments to shine in the action scenes. I mean, to get shot, but the character stuff is all Sam and Garland. But I doubt the book would sell as well if you called it Sam and Garland. Oh, and why are there 2 chapter 4s? The only typo I found in a comic about writing. Issues 3 and 4 are both chapter 4. I wonder if making at least one really glaring editorial mistake per project is just a contractual obligation in Spawn books. This series is really for anybody who likes crime thrillers and murder mysteries. It requires no prior reading, and there's not even an occult or supernatural component. This is as good as any procedural cop drama I've seen. Less than 3 weeks left, and the days are getting longer. But at least I got this rare gem to recrystallize what's left of my brain cells. Signed, Captain Spawn.